our next witness by video conference. I now want to welcome Mr. Graeme Buckmeister, and if you could please give your name and the capacity in which you're here today for the Hansard record.
Good afternoon, Glenn Steele, Senator, and Susan McDonald, Senator for the Australian Federal Government. My name is Graeme Scott Buckmaster. I'm a professional trucking operator, and my subject matter today will be fatigue, licensing, COR and exemptions.
Thanks, Mr. Buckmaster. Now I'm going to give you the opportunity to make your opening statement, and we will take some we will put some questions to you once you've finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. As you're well aware, I've already sent you some documents to show my validity here today. I've been around the transport industry a day or two. I've suffered from accidents in the transport industry, and I've generally been part of this industry for some 46 years, since first obtaining my licence in early 70s to drive a heavy vehicle. I'll start my submission here today with 4 key issues. I believe, as a long-standing, currently unemployed professional operator, I unofficially speak for thousands of operators trying to make a living in an industry that is over-governed, over-policed and over-regulated by interested parties with a share dividend, and I make reference here to the NHVR's current board as their primary goal from an industry that should be governed only by proper assented to federal laws and the Australian road rules only to simplify this industry, with subordinate legislated amendments to meet the demands of both the motoring and trucking industries accordingly, and as required by national growth within the simple and logistical solutions to this country's growing road transport demands. I have read all of the 117 submissions to the Senate inquiry and have uncovered wide-ranging common issues, both in governance and in dollar productivity values, from non-Australian individuals who only see this industry as a cash cow. And I make reference here today to the current non-Australian company, Auswide Solutions, Auswide Operations, and those who have allowed their academic skills to be wasted on an industry so simple to work in. Trucking is a simple industry to work in, with convoluted and somewhat restrictive suggestions copied and pasted from other countries' road rules, along with those from the multi corporates and stake and shareholders with financial interests at the forefront of their relevant submissions. My first issue here today is the fatigue word, and this is a very nasty word across our industry. It's a word that is creating a lot of drama, both in the courts, in the governments, and in everyday life of trucking across Australia. Fatigue is a neurological medical incident of the human brain. So therefore, as it is defined in the National Heavy Vehicle Laws, cannot be used to administer the current National Heavy Vehicle Laws. Accordingly, there are no government legislated testing parameters for the use of this said word in any of the current NHVLs or up and coming new laws, such as the new National Heavy Vehicle Laws 2.0, that are being pushed by the current NHVR and NTC accordingly for truck driving across Australia. The current enforcement authorities have no accredited personnel for the role, so as my mind says to you, should have no rights to interfere with any drivers going about their lawful duties or operating a heavy vehicle across any Commonwealth road system. South Australia has 5 only accredited personnel with any type of mechanical, fitting or maintenance qualifications from a state fleet of 22 on-road personnel, and none have any accreditation for fatigue. The current systems of control are the safety cam network, point-to-point cameras being rolled out across the Commonwealth into Western Australia, Glenn, as you are aware today, but are only having minimal effect on road safety issues and should be scrapped accordingly. There is so-called safety cameras do nothing for a driver's well-being other than force a driver to drive out of his or her natural abilities and increase accident risk purely by way of being placed in the strategic positions only to assist in counting time to be matched up with his or her book and fined accordingly for the breaches. Fatigue and the defining of, as it stands in today's trucking industry, the word has many meanings, and as is used in the National Heavy Vehicle Work Diary and by those administering its use. As a professional operator, my career has spanned some 46 years. Involvement in this industry, trucking and logistics, from the age of 18, when I obtained my first heavy vehicle licence. The book was a very simple and logical affair to deal with. It was a small 6 by 8 inch book, as I will show you here today, for Senator McDonald's. This used to be the old work diary, the logbook, currently. Today we have a book with 32 pages of instructions and counting, and is slightly bigger than a commercial A4 document. That is complicated and irrelevant to its required format of recording driving hours only. This current book, the National Heavy Work Diary, is nothing more than a legalised, legislated extortion racket run by a very corrupt and polluted board, the NHVR, along with a sanctioned federal agreement called the Intergovernmental Agreement of 2003.
Mr. Buckmaster, sorry. I want everyone to hear what you've got to say. I would, because I know under the standing orders, I will get my nose pulled with the accusation, fair or otherwise.
I will withdraw the word corrupt at this point.
Yeah, thanks. And you keep going on, please. Thank you.
Oh, where were we? Here's her national abilities. The current book, signed off on by ministers of both states and territories of the Commonwealth in the early stages of the inception for the NHVR. I'll move on to number 2, chain of responsibility and duty of care. This fine piece of legislation, as we see it today, is an inference, I should say, to all trucking operators around Australia and those working in any industry, or every person who must be responsible to themselves as individuals firstly, before appointing blame onto someone who is not directly involved in any accident, incident or activity as a singular individual and cannot under any law be convicted or accused for an alleged offence they have had no physical involvement in. A transport driver is responsible for his or her own actions once they enter the public road systems and must be aware of the obligations to themselves and fully understand their roles in loading, unloading, maintenance, knowledge, mass to weight configurations and associated tasks of the industry, which are very paramount in today's trucking industry. Weight to mass. It's a very sentence that not too many drivers today have any idea of what it's about. We can have many legislated requirements in transport, but if we continue to allow persons without the right set of principles and the correct aptitude for this particular industry, we will continue to see the high numbers of fatalities and associated irregularities in man's common right to work freely and safely without legislated duress. The old saying of "it wasn't my fault" must now be taken seriously by the Senate inquiry and addressed accordingly, as the current laws keep passing the buck from those without due diligence onto persons without due experience. Only a certificate on a wall, as we are seeing today across many fields of commercial and government business. Any government official, corporate CEO or policing officer must be held accountable for legislation that kills, maims or destroys public property. Licensing, number 3. This key part of any industry must be fully regulated and fully operated by our own federal government, for we are one nation, one country and one industry. But under freedom of states laws, each state has had its own requirements given back to them by the Commonwealth under separation of powers. We have had many working papers, many RIS documents, and I refer to Julia Gillard, 2007, 8 and 9, in relation to federal licensing, but each state has its own financial needs from its collection of licensing fees. So a Commonwealth system will not happen unless we change to a full licensing legislation package for all the Commonwealth now. We will continue to see the carnage on our roads, both on motoring and trucking. We now have a system of privatised instruction based on a dollar figure rather than a learning value. Today, we allow persons to obtain a licence, then go out onto the roads, networks and learn. That is not good enough. A 3-year practical hands-on apprentice scheme, as previously documented to Parliament, should be immediately implemented throughout schools at a Year 10 level for any form of heavy vehicle licence, with 3 main features being simply mechanical, loading and unloading, operating being the core attributes required. This is not good practical governance and should be stopped immediately by the federal government simply tabling an amendment in Parliament to halt all issuing of any further HA and MC licences now until we fix the problems and alleviate the high carnage rates on our roads. I have written to many ministers, both state and federal, for many years now, and the originating request went to the now Leader of the Opposition in federal Parliament in 2007, as he was the Federal Transport and Infrastructure Minister. The documents I have submitted in past years are on government records and now should be seriously looked at for new testing parameters for all these persons wishing to obtain a licence, whether it be for a car, motorbike or a heavy vehicle. In closing, I have advocated for an exemption program for senior operators, drivers of the trucking industry. For those with many years of on-road and practical experience be granted exemptions from the use of the National Heavy Vehicle Work Diary on grounds we have no bar or standards to set or work by, other than a general compliance and enforcement regime being used across all facets of road transport in the current structure of the National Heavy Vehicle laws. The only avenue for a said exemption is for illiteracy and nothing more. I, as an individual, personally refuse to use and carry the said National Heavy Vehicle Work Diary on the grounds it has no direct ability to control my occupational health and safety, or at any time contributes in any form for my working life. The current system we have today was implemented purely for revenue ahead of road safety, and it is backed by a package of control and compliance. By enforcement, these laws governing my industry were made worse when our working time was combined with our driving time to control the minorities of the industry by way of legislated pathways for the multi-corporates who control the current boards and officialdom of the industry today. I am open for discussions to the Senate here. I am willing to answer all questions you may have here today, and I do hope this inquiry can be a catalyst for fixing trucking rather than being just another inquiry that goes nowhere. I thank you both for listening.
Thanks, Mr. Buckmaster. Now, and you and I have had a conversation by phone, so we're no strangers to each other in the last couple of weeks and probably a couple of months prior to that. But see, I don't have a lot of issue of what you're saying around the transport industry. What you're saying, the majority of what you're saying is being echoed from all corners of the transport industry, from the top of the chain to the owner drivers, to the drivers and the companies. So there's a couple of things I want to touch on. And let's go to the prickly one first. Let's go to the hardest one, fatigue management. And I'm on the record very clearly that when I operated road trains in the great state of Western Australia, we didn't have fatigue management. We know what our fatigue management was. It was time to pull up and go to bed. I've just recently done a road train up the Kununurra, and I had to, in the first time in my life in Western Australia, not only write down what time I started, what time I stopped, what time I rest, I break, or whatever. Then I had to every day, which I still couldn't get my head around, I'm doing from Perth to Kununurra and back with the same prime mover, the same trailers and the same dolly, yet every day I had to write down, okay, all right. My, this is what we've done to the trucking industry. But same reason, I only did about 20 over the east-west, and I made a conscious decision that I didn't want to run east-west because I hated that little thing that you were holding up. There, that was bad. So, but we've got to get back to this, and please help me out here. Would you agree with me that the bad old days or the good old days are behind us now, where a lot more drivers are cognizant, if that's the word, of fatigue management compared to when we first started?
No, Glenn, I would have to honestly say, with all honesty, from my experience, that we've gone backwards.
Okay, how?
We've gone backwards in the fact that we're using that much electronic data today from the old mechanical engines. We are running electronic trucks today, and we have been for many years. Now, electronic engine today records the moment you turn the key to the moment you turn it off. Now, that is the only management system any company should have to provide, because we have gone too far with the legislation in relation to control of our industry. We need to take it back. We need to give control of our industry back to the industry as a whole body, not as splintered groups, the ATA, the NTC, SATA, the relevant bodies that are all fighting for that little piece of the chip, for the pie. We need to go backwards to fix our industry. What people don't understand is, in the prickly word fatigue, I don't suffer fatigue. And you know why I don't suffer it? Because in the armed forces as a young man, I learned about control of fatigue. I worked a 1 in 4 watch system, which basically gave me an 8-hour sleep every 4 days. So that I've applied to my working career. Physical fitness. When we took away our right to work before we drove, we wrecked this industry. We are now driving with clones, and those clones know no better than an electric truck with all the electric commodities like the vibrating seats, like the eye cameras, not worth a bumper, unless you've got a man with the capability here to steer that truck down the road. Our roads will never be to the point where we can use electronics successfully.
I suppose I was coming from there, Graeme, sorry. Where I was coming from there is when I first started and you first started. Well, let me just talk about when I did, because it was the West, and it was the Wild West, and it wasn't called the Wild West for any reason.
No.
And you were perceived to be weak if you wanted to pull over and have a sleep. Why can't you do 30 hours straight? What I was trying to allude to now, and I know my son's in trucking and a lot of the younger ones now, whatever, is they're far more conscious that they can't be the yeehaw, I'm going to break every law around fatigue. That's where I was trying to go down that path. You don't agree with me that the generation of drivers are far more aware that you can't do this legally? Yeah, that's probably.
They are aware today, yes, because A, they're a lot younger. They don't have the expertise or the knowledge that we had or we learned from our elders, and the people that we learned from are now gone. So it is our role now to put our knowledge and our experience into these young people. The logbook is not the answer. The National Heavy Vehicle work, the National Heavy Regulator isn't the answer. Fatigue can be managed by every individual simply by doing physical work. The body reproduces itself. Fatigue should not be a major factor in road transport, Glenn.
But Graeme, what we have determined, and it would be wrong of us not to say this, but fatigue has been a major cause of some terrible accidents over the years. See, my view, Graeme, is I don't have the ability to manage my fatigue like you do. And I say that with honesty because I'm one of those people who would go up the road. I'd go have breakfast. I'd had 6 hours sleep the night before or 4 hours sleep. I'd go have brekkie, then I'd be looking for the next truck bay. That's how I met. And we did that. But how do we do it in such a way? Look, trucks don't just fall off the road. You and I know that. They don't just bump into each other at 2 o'clock in the morning all the time because the steering just bounced out or whatever.
That's correct.
So what I'm trying to do, and what we've managed to do in this nation is we've over-regulated, enforced all these laws, and the only ones that get pinged normally are the people who are trying to do the right thing.
Correct.
So what I'd be interested in your views here is, what do we do for the rat bags who will push their drivers who are not good at managing or don't have that ability that you possess and other people possess? What would be your thoughts around that? Because you know
we cannot allow a corporation to tell a driver, and I can honestly say to this day, and I will swear to this, I have never been pushed by any company I've ever worked for. So the fallacy around what you're saying is existing. It is there. But a driver, as I stated before, as an individual, has a right to put his hand up, as we did in the Navy. If we couldn't function, we did not operate. And that is what we have to do. We have to go back to basics. We have to take it back because fatigue does not exist. It's a word that was designed in the late 90s to bring Australia into an area of control.
But Graeme, I'm in constant touch with drivers as you are yourself.
Yes.
And there are still many drivers who relay messages to me, mate, where drivers where the boss will say, get in that effing truck and get going.
Well, then that driver should pull up, take his gear out of the truck and leave it there.
Yeah, but Graeme, I agree with you, mate. I agree because, mate, no one forced me to do it. There was many times I was asked, why can't you be in Carnarvon tomorrow morning? Because you've been loading all day today. Why is that? I was never, ever, I did my own thing. We all did our...
That's right. That's the way it should be today.
But not everyone possesses that ability to do that. And I don't want to run a defence or a smoke screen for, the poor bugger had a house to pay off. Because my argument, Graeme, is, well, the poor bugger's not thinking about paying off his house, his wife and his kids if he just succumbs to that stupid, dangerous demand and then goes out and kills himself. That's all I'm trying to ask, mate, because human frailty, mate, is something that we're dealing with all the time. I'm not running a protection record for him, but it's there, mate.
It is there, Frank. It's there because Glenn, because we've allowed it to come in there. We've allowed licensing. We've allowed the privatisation of a system that should never have been privatised. Glenn, when you're accepted into the armed forces, there's the bad side and the good side. Now, if you can't train and be trained and to do your job responsibly, then you don't get a job. And that is what we have to have here in the industry. We need a very, very, very tough licensing system. Half the blokes out there today, I would take a licence off. I wouldn't allow to drive a heavy vehicle because they don't have the aptitude. You don't give a man a gun and go and tell him to shoot himself in the foot. Well, you don't give a heavy vehicle driver a $1 million piece of equipment with 3 trailers hanging on behind him. Frank, Glenn, I never towed a triple until the early 2000s because I wasn't wanted to, because I could make more money putting 2 loads on one trailer. So consequently, you must be training people from the get-go. That is the only way we are going to fix this problem and teach people to work. That is the key to all our issues, work.
And I have absolutely no qualms with your assessment of the poor training qualities in this nation, and we've seen that so many times. And as we said earlier, we learnt through the good old days, and because we pested our old man, or mum made us pester the old man, or an uncle, or someone, or a brother, and that's how we learned. We didn't have the experience we learned when we were 16 or 17. We got it by the time we got older, and I'll speak for myself here, Graeme. A lot of the mistakes that I knew how to avoid, I knew because I made those bloody mistakes, and that's how I learned.
Glenn, I made a conscientious decision with that accident that I sent you, the picture of the upturned truck. I'd been doing it pretty hard the last couple of weeks prior to that accident, but I made a conscious decision to keep my son at home. It was school holidays. His rite of passage was to hop in that truck for his school holidays and spend the time with me, where he learned. But because I was tired, I was run down, I was a little bit off my game, I made him stay home because I didn't want the responsibility of him at the time. But in the process of the next 3 or 4 days, the start of the holidays, I'd regenerated myself through going out and loading onions by hand in the morning, going out and unloading, doing the physical yards that keeps your body going, which combats fatigue. So I made a conscious decision back then. So I made the right decision. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a son here today. He'd be flat underneath that bunk. So I made those conscious decisions. That is what our drivers of today must be made to do. They must be made to look at themselves in the mirror and say, I'm not a truck driver. We need to move on.
All right, now let's just, now in the time that we have left, we'll go back a bit more of the training. And as we know in this nation, it can be exploited, it has been exploited. There's no ifs or buts about it. But how do we attract young people and how do we attract women to this industry when anyone listening to this inquiry and previous inquiries, all right, at the end of the day would say, why the hell do I want to be in that industry with all the dramas that are going on? So if you had the keys to the training or let's just say the training dollars, what would you do?
I would go to our schools, into all our high schools, into our TAFE colleges, into our tech schools, and put up seminars for young kids of today. Because there are a lot of young kids out there with fumes in their heads. It'd be either gas or burnouts or whatever. So you go back to the schools today and you offer the kids and a lifestyle. You have to do a presentation to the kids in school. You have to, which I'd done in 2007 with the Labor government. I put a proposal together to go to the schools and put up a proposal to invite young kids out for seminars, for working weeks, for work experience within the industry. I personally, as a professional driver, would take a young person with me in the truck today of 18 years of age, sit him in the seat alongside me, and then I would determine when and where he drove and under what conditions. That is what we need to do today. We need to take our young by the hand and we need to train them. That is what we need to do. And we start that at the schools, at the high schools. Year 9 or year 10, we write a program, which I've done. We take all the glossy pictures of the fast trucks and the big rigs and all the rest of it. But we also take in the crash statistics of squash cabins, of trucks that have been disseminated by accidents. You know, we take in all the gruesome parts of the industry. And the thing is today with insurance, I can no longer take a passenger because we've allowed our insurance companies to dictate terms, which effectively has stopped any owner drivers, not so much owner drivers. I work for a lot of good companies, Glenn, and a lot of those good companies allowed me as a professional to take my children in the truck because they deemed me safe. That is what we need to do. We need to put the insurance companies back in the box where they belong. They're there to insure the truck. They're not there to make the rules. That's what we do. We put our career days back into the schools with people like myself. I don't have any certificates on the wall, but as I showed you the pictures, I've done my miles, I've done my hard yards, and those hard yards are being wasted here today by me having to sit here and tell you that I'm unemployed when I should be out there driving a heavy vehicle. And I'm here today because I refuse to bow down to the corrupt laws.
All right, so just in summarising, because of the time, and I appreciate, so we've been running late today, but one of the a very topical point of view here too through the committee has been seriously where we can put kids in aeroplanes at 16, we can give them the keys to the B8 car at 17, and yet we don't want to know them till they're 18 before they get a forklift. Now, I know a lot of the people I speak to in the transport industry, everywhere you go, there's a forklift. And we know how kids think, Graeme, okay? Remember us when we were that age, if you got to steer the forklift, what a buzz that was. You actually learned, but you were learning. So I know SATA were on earlier, and Steve Shearer has said that they've designed something where they're going to get into the schools, into 16-year-olds, which is the schools. What's your views around the lower hanging fruit, I should say, of entry-level jobs, and what better way to start with the 16-year-olds learning to drive a forklift?
Put TAFE back on the board, put our federal government back in control of education, including TAFE, where young kids can learn to drive forklifts round blocks, round corners, tight corners. We need to open up our industry by going to the industry and saying, here is an incentive to take a young apprentice at 14 or 15 and guide him through these pathways, guide him through the mechanical, hop in the pit and grease trailers, adjust brakes. I'm being told today I'm not allowed to adjust a brake, which you know yourself, you've done a few in your time. We're not allowed to do that anymore. That is why we must take our young kids of today and put them back in the hands of old people like myself. That's what we need to do. We need to go backwards. And we need to become, our instructors need to come from within our industry. And one thing I will say is we gave young 15, 16, 17-year-old men guns and sent them to war in World War I. Today, we're bitching about putting a kid on a forklift at 16. How much hypocrisy is that? Our government needs to take a good, long, hard look at itself and understand our industry is west of the Blue Mountains, not up and down the Hume. That's what our problem is. We run blinkers. We run them up and down the eastern seaboard. We don't step over the Great Divide where it all happens. As you know yourself, I would personally like to see South Australia get out of the NHVR now, step away and join WA and Northern Territory in running the WA system of compliance. It is a simple, straightforward system of governance. and it allows the driver and the operator to do their jobs properly.
Yeah, just clarifying that too. When I'd said earlier with the run I did up Canberra, I really threw the bloody thing out the window. But I also wasn't worried because I knew that I wasn't going to lose my licence. I wasn't going to lose half my pay, because we have a regime over here where we don't have this ridiculous on-road enforcement to the point where the coppers are rubbing their hands together every time a truck comes around the corner so they can...
You will have shortly. You will have shortly.
Let me tell you, Graeme, as long as I'm around and my colleagues over here, we are heavily resisted and we don't... Anyway, don't start me on that one.
Like to take a bet on it? Like to take a bet on it?
Yeah, I'm a betting man. I'll have a $2.
Yeah, I'll put a slab on it.
All right.
I'll guarantee you, you'll have them within 12 months.
We're on the
collecting revenue for your state ahead of road safety.
And I'll be reminded otherwise, because I'm happy to take that bet. So just saying on that too, then, Graeme, just as we wrap up, I want to thank you very much. I'm sorry, Senator McDonald, I've taken up all the time. Forgive me. You okay? It's okay. Thanks. And Graeme, look, take care. Good luck. I appreciate you making the effort to front with us today. And I'd like to thank everyone else. And we know where to find you should we need to follow up. And please, and I know you won't be a stranger to me, if there's anything else you want to add, please do. Unfortunately, the room that we know is booked till 1 o'clock there in Canberra. So Paula, thank you very much for your tolerance. And we're only 2 minutes late. So to everyone who has appeared today, on behalf of Senator McDonald and myself, thank you to Hansard Broadcasting, thank you very much. And to our Secretary, Paula and co. Thank you kindly. Take care, Mr. Buckmaster. Drive safely.
Thank you, Senators. I thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye all.
Bye-bye.